I guess, if anything, cause we spoke around the time of the Victorian election and the cost of living issues were already potent then. They were really biting at that time. If anything, they're worse now.
That's right. And even back then, the public generally in Victoria weren't paying much attention to the state election in terms of what each party was promising. There was one policy announcement that did capture their imagination. It was this particular announcement. And that shouldn't be a surprise to any of us. Even in New South Wales right now, we find family households with very, very good incomes are actually borderline contemplating skipping meals or making some fairly harsh judgments when it comes to balancing the family budget. So these announcements strike at the heart of that.
So in terms of your polling and surveys in recent times, number 1, 2 and 3 for the biggest issues for people are those cost of living pressures, and I guess they just get more and more so with every rate rise, Cos.
That's right. So the problem that most Australians now have isn't just about the rate rises, it's all the other inflationary aspects of what is going on right now. So it's petrol, it's food, it's right across the board. They're getting hammered from all different directions. So they're looking towards their politicians for some relief. And this SEC announcement, in some part, gives them that impression that it will provide at least some control within the market in terms of the retail aspect of how much electricity actually costs.
Cos, on to a few other issues related, because obviously cost of living will be relevant to the upcoming Aston by-election in the eastern suburbs of Melbourne. Give me your read of things. Do the Liberals go in as the favourites, given the history of by-elections and basically that oppositions haven't won a seat off a government at a by-election for 100 years?
Yeah, that's right, since the early 1920s. So I would say a couple of things here. First of all, we have to ask ourselves the question, has the coalition stocks within the electorate improved since last May? I think based on what we know through the public polls, the answer is no. And has Anthony Albanese's stocks within the public improved since last May? I think we can say yes. Then we look at the recent public polls, particularly the one that was published this morning in Resolve in the Fairfax newspapers, that the National Liberal Coalition primary vote is at 30%. Can we say to ourselves that out there in Aston right now that the primary vote in Aston for the Liberal Party is anywhere near 40? Hard to see how that can happen. So I would say we could see an upset on the cards here where a federal Commonwealth government for the first time snatches a seat off the opposition. It's definitely a possibility.
Give us a sense of what Aston, the seat, is like in electoral terms. We know they've voted Liberal for a long time, haven't they?
That's right. It's really one of the few seats that have provided any stability to the coalition, particularly in Melbourne, I would say, over the last 10 years. But even at the last federal election, it went down to 2.8%. Aston's effectively is a federal seat that has two halves to it. First half is obviously the northern part, which is Bayswater, the Bayswater end, which historically has been moving away from the coalition towards Labor, both at a state and federal level. But the coalition stronghold is Rowville, which is the southern parts of the electorate, where you find a lot of self-made wealth. We call it sort of tradie belt of Melbourne. And that still performs quite well for the coalition at a state and federal level. So that's why I think the coalition will be looking to hold its ground and then make some inroads into that northern part.
The Liberal Party very keen to, and the leader, to say he wants a woman as the candidate. Would that, I mean, obviously they're trying to get some equity in terms of their representation within the parliament, but is it also a good move in terms of trying to retain Aston?
It would be for that northern part. So we do know that in the Bayswater part of the electorate, the one thing that has changed over the last 10 years is an influx of what we will define as millennials, people under the age of 40, looking for cheaper homes. Now in Melbourne, unlike Sydney, you can still buy a home out there in outer eastern suburbs of Melbourne for around $700,000 to $750,000, versus you can't find something cheaper in Camden or in Sydney for less than $900,000. So you find that those young professionals are now moving further out and into those parts, and they will be looking at these sort of issues. Is the Liberal Party serious about modernising itself? Is it serious about connecting to a new and emerging constituency, which is this younger millennial Generation Z cohort?
And finally, because let me ask you about where the Voice is at. Where do you see support for the Voice to Parliament right now? We're still a number of months away from the referendum, but what's your read?
The read has not changed. In other words, people are still very unclear what it means. They're not across the detail. It does come across to many voters as something that is not top of mind. In other words, I've heard of it, I've not heard of it, I really don't know what it's about, I really don't care. I'm really just at the moment focusing on trying to get by. And so I think the Yes campaign, its biggest hurdle is cutting through that financial crisis that is now befalling many households in this country.